And we're back in the car like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Friday evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Today marks 33 years since the release of a very controversial, very polarizing film, which was not really liked that much by critics. Didn't get, it's not even fresh, I don't think, on Rotten Tomatoes. I remember a lot of the major critics just fucking savaging this film. But nevertheless, it rolled up a more than $350 million box office worldwide. That is a crazy number for an R-rated movie. But for 1992, time value of money, inflation, etc., that is just almost impossible to conceive. And this film serves as the second in Michael Douglas, I guess you could say, sexual mores, sexual politics trilogy. The first movie being Fatal Attraction, where he plays a happily married man, we think, happily married man who just, randomly decides to have an affair and then acts all butthurt, no pun intended, when the woman he has the affair with catches feelings and, hey, I'm worth a little bit more than a couple of good times, a-hole. Well, that's not the way Michael Douglas's Dan Gallagher sees it. The third film in the Michael Douglas sexual politics, sexual assault, bisexual ice pick murderers trilogy, the third film is Disclosure. The one with Demi Moore and actually a pretty funny Dennis Miller in a supporting role. Not a great movie, based on a best-selling book by Michael Crichton, but I would say that of those three films, Disclosure is the weakest. It's okay. The book was better. Movie is just okay. But in that film, Michael Douglas is sexually harassed by his boss, who thinks because she's his boss, a little bit of a twist on the David Mamet Oleana routine. The film is not good. But Fatal Attraction deals with adultery. Very hot button issue, especially at the beginning of the AIDS era. People were really nervous. There's a lot more going on in Fatal Attraction than just the mechanics of plot. And there is a lot more going on in the movie Disclosure than just the mechanics of plot. It just isn't that good. Very strong, very aggressive performance by Demi Moore. But, Michael Douglas was kind of too old even then for that role. They needed a younger actor. That movie works if it's Brad Pitt of that era. Hell, even Tom Cruise. Somebody in that ballpark. I was going to say Christian Slater. I don't think Christian Slater works in that, but it doesn't work as presented. Basic Instinct is not altogether successful. The mystery doesn't quite add up. There are a lot of elements in the film where you scratch your head and say, well, this is not that, come on. But it's so well directed by the fantastic Dutch filmmaker Paul Verhoeven, a guy who made a great living in Europe. He did films like Soldier of Orange, with Rutger Hauer, and other films over there. Spetters was also him. And then he came to the United States and he made movies like Total Recall, which I love. And that's how Sharon Stone got the female lead in this film, because she's so good in Total Recall. That was a star-making, almost superstar-making turn opposite Arnold, considered it a divorce. There are people who are on the receiving end of famous one-liners or wisecracks. Put that coffee down. Alec Baldwin, who's on the other end of that rant? Jack Lemmon. Well, consider that a divorce from Arnold Schwarzenegger in Total Recall. Spoiler alert, it's Sharon Stone as his wife, who is on the receiving end. Consider that a divorce. They're married, right? Very, very nail meat head. But Basic Instinct is a film that I saw in theaters on its opening day. I was not really having a great time as a Massapequa High School senior. This was coming to the end of my primary academic career, and I was failing almost every class. And Murphy's Law was in effect in my personal life. I didn't really have a personal life is kind of what I'm getting at, but everything else was going wrong. Flunking every class. Here's a little bit of a secret. I don't know how I graduated high school. I feel like there was a little bit of fuzzy math because I don't understand how I actually graduated high school. And then, went on to be a better college student than a high school student. In college, I didn't flunk any classes. In high school, just one after another. F, 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 F. Yeah, here's your diploma, kid. Good work. Okay. But I was not doing well. I didn't have a driver's license yet. I was already 18. And I walked from my house in Massapequa, not far from the All-American Hamburger Stand, for those of you familiar with that part of Long Island. Walked all the way to the Sunrise Mall. I was miserable. Everything was bad. Had a crush on a girl, couldn't talk to her, social anxiety disorder, not getting along with my mom. My mom's boyfriend was horrendous. Like, everything was going wrong. Was I even going to go to college? But there I go, walking to Sunrise Mall. It's got to be a 3-mile walk all the way to almost Amityville from the part of Massapequa where I grew up. Walk all the way over there. And I do have some interesting choices. Now, it was in my head that I was going to see Basic Instinct, but did I really need to see a movie about ice pick killers, a serial killer, a book author who uses her fiction to maybe disguise her murders, or maybe not? Maybe this entire movie is a fever dream. I don't know. But that was the film that I walked to the theater to see. But when I got to the theater, I saw a couple of other interesting films, one of which is now an absolute all-time classic, and the other one, not so good. The two other choices, which were playing at around, I guess, 7 p.m. would have been when I got there, somewhere in that ballpark. The Lawnmower Man, which was originally promoted as Stephen King's The Lawnmower Man because he wrote a short story called The Lawnmower Man, but the movie had absolutely nothing to do with the story. And when King, I guess, was told they didn't really leave very much of what you came up with, I don't know if he sued or if he just asked the studio, hey, can you get my name off this? Because this is not even 2% of what I did in the book. It's about a guy who mows lawns by eating grass. Like, it's ridiculous. Or he said something like that. So I wasn't going to see The Lawnmower Man, but I very heavily considered seeing My Cousin Vinny, which was in its second weekend in release. And quite some time ago on the channel, I talked about, speaking of trifecta, the incredible 3-week stretch in 1992 in which a brand name, not just a Gen X standard, although they all are, but one brand name movie was released over a 3-week stretch. My Cousin Vinny on March 13, Basic Instinct March 20, and White Men Can't Jump March 27th. Now, if you didn't know anything about box office or reviews or any of that sort of stuff, you probably would think that My Cousin Vinny was the most successful of those 3 films. I feel like it's of those 3, the one which is best remembered from the historical standpoint. Marissa Tomei won the Oscar for Best Supporting. My biological clock is ticking like this. What exactly is a grit? Joe Pesci is a scream. The late Fred Gwynne is a riot. Lane Smith as the attorney, he's funny. The movie is gold. But history tells us, if we read the numbers, Basic Instinct, 352 million. White Men Can't Jump, made in the 70s. My Cousin Vinny was a modest hit in the low 50s. I decided that I wanted to see Basic Instinct. As much as I was looking forward to My Cousin Vinny, I'll see that another time. And I did. I didn't end up watching that in theaters, but the next week I went to see White Men Can't Jump. So I settled in for Basic Instinct. There was a lot of controversy, a lot of cultural critics. And that is not a criticism. I remember Camille Paglia weighed in on it, Naomi Wolf. There were a lot of different, very powerful women who had seen this film and would weigh in on it. And they were, depending on how you look at it, as Thelma and Louise from the previous year, is that a feminist film or is it anti-feminist? Is Barbie a feminist text or is it an anti-feminist text? You can argue whatever you want. I have done that. I have taken every side of Dirty Harry. Is it a liberal film? Oh, yeah. And I could talk for a half hour. Is it proto-fascist? Oh, yeah, I can talk about that too. Does it play right down the middle? I can give you a half hour on that too. It's really just a matter of, well, in my case, what mood I'm in at this particular time. But most people felt that Basic Instinct was effective at the level of a suspense film. Paul Verhoeven's direction is perfect, and the great Jerry Goldsmith, top 5 greatest composers of film music. He's a peer of John Williams. He's that good. Goldsmith's score for Basic Instinct, it's as good as any other score he did. And his score for Chinatown is incredible. He did the score for Star Trek The Motion Picture, a mind-bogglingly incredible score. Shitty movie with Richard Gere, right? First Night from 95, unbelievable score. Matinee with John Goodman, also an incredible score. Basic Instinct is a gorgeous film populated with mostly really good-looking people, and it holds the attention, and there's a lot of laughs, even though it's not a comedy. 18-year-old me with zero social life, or watching a scene at the beginning and some rock star is having sex with what we think is a hot blonde. I think it's supposed to be Sharon Stone, but this is either to the movie's credit or not, depending on if you think they just never figured out who killed who. But we think it's Sharon Stone, and the rock star guy ends up with an ice pick in his cranium, or at least I think it's in his cranium. And then Michael Douglas, our guy, right? One of the all-timers, Nick Curran, is the detective. He's assigned to the case. He's checking out the murder scene. And I don't think it's his character, but one of the characters is assessing the kind of blood and all kinds of other stuff, tissue samples. We can get some DNA. And one of the characters goes, "We have some seminal stains over here." And Michael Douglas goes, "At least he got off before he got offed." That got a big laugh. At least he got off before he got off. Yeah, that's great. So the film takes the form of a whodunit. And Sharon Stone doesn't have anything to work with. The character of Catherine Trammell is rote and really one-dimensional. They try to make us think that she's not, but she's presented in a very straightforward, almost aggravating fashion, because you can see Sharon is giving everything she's got. And as wacky as this seems, there was even some Oscar buzz for her because, as Billy Crystal famously said, and Sharon was in on this joke, this was not, it's inappropriate, but she knew it was that they were going to make this joke. There were so few really great roles for women in the, from the Hollywood mainstream perspective. You had Michelle Pfeiffer in Love Field. She's okay, but that movie's just not good. That's not a movie that should have had anything to do with being nominated for Oscar. And then you had Catherine Deneuve in a movie that nobody saw called Indochine. And, as Billy Crystal said, 1992 for the Hollywood was supposed to be the year of the women. And unfortunately, this was kind of a poor year for women's parts. In fact, some of the best women's parts were Sharon Stone's in Basic Instinct. That got an enormous embarrassed laugh at the Oscars, of 93 for the films released in 92. And to Sharon Stone's everlasting credit, because I'm pretty sure she was briefed, when they flashed to her in the audience, she's laughing right along. If she was pissed off or if she didn't want the joke to be told, she did a great acting job there too. She's cracking up. And she also, if I remember correctly, she brought back the sort of old school glamour. She was dressed like Rita Hayworth or Jean Harlow from, Hollywood's kind of golden era of movies. But Sharon does the best she can with the fact that her character is just really a frustrating character, and not because I'm frustrated because I don't know if she's a killer, because there's just nothing there. And the screenwriter for Basic Instinct, Joe Esterhaas, super successful, a really talented guy. He wrote a lot of scripts for films that ended up not being good. And you can point to certain screenplays of his where his work was better than what ended up on screen. His screenplay for the movie called Jade, which was 1995, Linda Fiorentino, Chaz Palminteri, among others, William Friedkin, a phenomenal filmmaker, another movie that looks incredible. That was a script that read really well, and I don't think that Friedkin, who am I to say this? This is fucking stupid. I don't think that Friedkin I don't think that he did a good job adapting that particular script, and God strike me dead. But I feel like Friedkin didn't have the right handle that time, because that was a script that read better than what ended up on screen. Basic Instinct it's just not, there's more. They could have done more with it. And Michael Douglas's character is three-dimensional, and he's not a particularly nice guy. And this is another thing with Michael Douglas I should have mentioned at the top. He made a career, almost literally, out of playing protagonists who are rootable, meaning you can get behind them, but they're not particularly likable. And Michael Douglas was so good in this era, and even, a little bit further into the decade, movies like The Game. Michael Douglas played a lot of characters who, under different circumstances, would be the antagonist. And so, for example, well, in Falling Down, he is the antagonist. He's the protagonist and the antagonist. Jack Nicholson, she's my sister, or it's actually Faye Dunaway. She's my sister. She's my daughter. She's my sister and my daughter. In Falling Down, Michael Douglas is the protagonist and he's the antagonist. He's the protagonist and the antagonist. But you look at what he does in Fatal Attraction. I mean, Dan Gallagher's a nice guy, but you can't forgive the fact that he's running around on his very awesome wife and the daughter that they both adore. It's really bad. Then he plays a pretty much heel character in Black Rain. It's a little bit of an old school Western or a Yojimbo kind of a story, to throw a Kurosawa reference in there, in that the main character is essentially a bad guy, but he is less bad than the Yakuza people trying to bump him off and trying to kill his partner, played really well, I should say, by Andy Garcia. And Kate Capshaw has a good role in that film. I would say that her, she gives a broader performance than she does in, a film like Temple of Doom. She takes a lot of criticism because she's kind of the weak link, but I like her performance in Black Rain. But Douglas was playing these kinds of characters. Well, in the case of Wall Street, you could say that he's the villain of the piece, although maybe you could argue that the financial system itself is the villain of the piece. I don't know. But he excelled in playing characters you could understand why they did what they did without saying, oh yeah, this is a good guy. And nobody would ever look at Nick Hearn and say, yeah, he's a great guy. No, he sucks. He's terrible. His whole process is messed up in this film. But something that doesn't often register in movies, and it didn't really hit for me when I was a kid, but now you look back on it as somebody, I always say stuff like this, but it bears repeating and to think about, especially if you're a lot younger than I am. If you have not experienced something that is up there on screen, you are reacting to it more as a passive observer than if you get it, if you understand. And the character of Nick Curran apparently hasn't been with a woman in quite some time. And how do we know this? Because his loony psychiatrist, I guess she's supposed to be the police psychiatrist, the G.N. Triplehorn character. Now, she was not, I don't think she was very good in the movie The Firm. She plays Tom Cruise's wife, but she's an actress I really like. In the right role, she has, the eyes. She has a really good face for the movies, of this era. I just didn't like her performance in The Firm. I don't know. She seemed a little bit miscast, but she's a police psychiatrist. And we're led to believe that she and Nick Curran have, I don't want to say they had an affair. I think they used to date or they had a relationship. Everybody always says I had an affair. You got two single people. They're not having an affair. But she is asking questions that are not really that appropriate. And the way Michael Douglas plays this scene is gold. He has that kind of very stern look on his face, almost a little bit of a don't fuck with me kind of a gaze. And so she basically asks him how his social life is. I think she says social life. I don't think that she goes any further than that. And Michael Douglas, it's one of the 10 greatest moments, maybe top 5 best moments of his entire career, because you don't expect a guy like Michael Douglas to play a scene this way. How's your social life? Michael Douglas, as only he can. I'm trying to imagine, maybe Clint Eastwood would get a few laughs, like that moment in Unforgiven where Morgan Freeman asks him in as nice a way as possible, your wife has passed, do you ever go into town to visit a woman? And he's not trying to be funny. He's asking the question. And Clint, as William Money, he kind of gives him a look as if to say no. But then Morgan just goes, well, what, do you use your hand? And Clint gives him a Clint look. So maybe he could have done this. But when she asks Michael Douglas, how's your social life? Michael Douglas just goes like this. I have calluses. That was the single biggest laugh in the entire film. Even me at 18 with zero social life. I got it. I understand what it means. It didn't go over my head, so to speak. I got calluses. He has no social life. So the fact that he has not had S-E-X, in a while. Then there's a very, very, I don't even know what you would call it. Is it a pretend assault? But whatever it is, he and the character that Jeanne Tripplehorn plays, Beth, they have sex. He destroys her outfit. It's not really that great of a scene for Nick Curran because it's over before it starts. You know, and I guess we're supposed to think that he has gone so long that, you know, the phrase 2-pump chump, he's about a 1/4 pump chump and, you know, it's all over. I'll just destroy your clothing, you know, rip your necklace, rip this, rip that. And, you know, you can get out of my apartment or I'll leave your apartment, whatever the case might be. But when he meets Sharon Stone's Catherine Trammell, and this is where the movie is beyond absurd. He thinks that she's a serial killer. He thinks that she's a serial killer. And the movie plays a little bit like Sea of Love with Al Pacino and, you know, John Goodman and Ellen Barkin. But that film is way better than this. Body Heat, one of my favorites with William Hurt. I just talked about him yesterday. It runs circles around Basic Instinct because in Sea of Love, Al Pacino is convinced that Ellen Barkin is not the killer. In Body Heat, Ned Racine, William Hurt's character, does not think that Maddie Walker is anywhere near as horrifyingly treacherous as she actually is. I would say that Maddie Walker from Body Heat, on the scale of evil, she's an 11. Maybe Catherine Trammell's a 7. Like, there are levels here. Nick Curran thinks that Catherine Trammell is the killer, and he just keeps having sex with her. Knowing that she killed people, if he's right, after they had sex, with an ice pick. Bro, come back to me. That's what she said. What are you doing? And his partner, I guess the George DeZunza character, talk about a thankless role. He keeps telling him, bro, walk the fuck away. What are you doing? Well, I guess Nick Curran's really horny and she is hot, so I'm just going to keep going over there, or she's going to keep coming over here. Also, that's what she said. Now, the movie Body Heat, it's part of the plot. It's much more convoluted and complicated and brilliant than what we're presented with in Basic Instinct. But Ned Racine is able to make excuses that we know are simply excuses, but they work in the context of the story that he is the attorney for Kathleen Turner's character. So he has more of a reason to hang out with her, so to speak. The only reason why Nick Curran keeps going to Sharon Stone is because he's into the sex, but it's just not, there's logic and then there's illogic. And it seems to me that it's just plot machinery. It's just, okay, because we have to move it from point A to point B to point C. And there's a lot of stuff in this film that doesn't stand up to close scrutiny. We go along with it though, because it does hold us. That music is so good. And there are a lot of scenes of songs that were popular at the time. There's a techno song. I forgot the name of it on the soundtrack, but there are some memorable moments. The scene in the nightclub it's kind of iconic. It's not really that important from a plot perspective, but it's memorable nevertheless. You know, Michael Douglas is trying to, I guess, appear he's a little bit younger. There is a lot of stuff in this movie that probably doesn't play as well now. There are moments where we'll howl with laughter, maybe at some of the hairstyles and the clothing. And this is a movie to me that is between 2.5 and 3 stars out of 4. There are some people who are, like, if you go on YouTube, there are movie reactors that think the film is phenomenal. I was very frustrated leaving the theater. I thought that there was a better movie somewhere. This is me at 18. I'm 2.5 years away from New York University Film School. I was just a kid who loved movies and who read about movies. I had already a nice collection of movie books. But it bothered me that Michael Douglas's character, there was no internal logic. And the fact that, well, he's horny, that I get that. I understand that. But there still was no internal logic. This is not a 16-year-old kid having sex for the first time. This is a guy presumably around 50 who has been around the block and back, and he has the loony psychiatrist who wants to keep hooking up with him. If he's so desperate, you know, keep building up the calluses, pal. Anything's better than getting an ice pick stuck in your head or your neck or wherever she's going to put it, if in fact she is really the killer. I don't know. Is she? I've seen this movie 3 times, and I think maybe there are 2 killers? A little bit of a Scream before Scream? I'm not sure. But I do know that there was a sequel a decade or so later. Not good. Not good. And I'm a big Sharon Stone fan. I think she's a fascinating personality. She is somebody who started in the business. She made a ton of movies, did a lot of B films, like the Alan Quatermain movie with Richard Chamberlain. And then she became a star. And it was just a matter of time because she looks like an old school movie star, the Sharon of, late 80s into the 90s. She would have easily fit in with the Grace Kellys and that era of, kind of starlets, whether you want to talk about, as I said, Rita Hayworth or Jean Harlow or Grace Kelly, or even somebody like a Janet Leigh a little bit later than them. She just had that look. And smoking, and everybody remembers, what are you going to do? Charge me with smoking? And did she or did she not, uncross her legs a certain way so that we could see something? I didn't see anything. Spoiler alert. And I don't think anybody else saw anything either. There wasn't anything, but a little bit of a Mandela effect. There are people who are convinced that in theaters opening night, we did see it. I don't think so. I think it was always a bit of a mind fuck that it was thrown out there. Hey, she uncrosses her legs and she's not wearing underwear. She's doing it in the world of the movie to screw with the cops. Whatever. I didn't see anything, and I hold to that. It was just like a thought experiment. And we were either supposed to agree or disagree. Did this really happen? A Milgram experiment, like one of those. But I think of, when I think of the best film noir, when I think of the best films of this type, Body Heat, Sea of Love, and another movie I recently talked about on the channel, Blink. That was the one with Aidan Quinn and Madeline Stowe. They're very similar because that movie actually is the closest, that and Sea of Love, because it deals with a serial killer. Body Heat is not a movie. It's a movie where the plot involves murder, but it is a lot of sex and a woman, cliche though this may be, using sex to get a helpless guy to do her bidding. That's not what happens in Sea of Love. That's not really what happens in Basic Instinct, and it for sure isn't what happens in Blink, which of those movies probably has the most conventional romantic component between the stars, who I adore both of them. They're so great. Aidan Quinn and Madeline Stowe. But Basic Instinct, a runaway, humongous box office hit. I believe it made more money in Europe even than it did in the United States. I don't think it was number 1 at the box office, domestic box office for 92. I think Aladdin, I could be wrong there. I think Aladdin was number 1 as far as domestic box office, but Basic Instinct just ran up crazy tally. Again, $352 million 33 years ago. Unbelievable. But it shows, also like Fatal Attraction with Michael Douglas, it struck a nerve. It struck a chord with audiences. It was the kind of film that got people talking. And when we talk about old school word of mouth, it's not always, this is a great movie, go see it. There's an element of that. And most people I knew who saw Basic Instinct, whether my age or adults, they were telling other people, you got to see this. Was it great? It was pretty good, but you got to see this movie. And that kind of, it had an it factor. It had a high Q rating where people were talking about it for months. And that's how a film becomes legend and legendary, because not just the box office, but the fact that it was controversial and got a lot of people not only talking, but arguing tooth and nail. You could probably find some of the culture critics discussing it and arguing on Larry King in 1992 and other kinds of talk shows. And for someone like me, that's all great, because movies are not just for entertainment. They are a window into culture. And this is a sort of movie that was a bit of a nasty window into American culture, circa early 1990s. And it really hit with people. And here we are 33 years later. And it is one of those movies that a lot of Gen Xers will put, as one of their best or favorite suspense thrillers. I just think it's a super entertaining film with a lot of plot holes. But hey, that's just my opinion. Speaking of Dennis Miller, I could be wrong. But Basic Instinct, released 33 years ago Friday. I think the actual release date was March 20th, 1992, which was a Friday. So I walked to Sunrise Mall to see this film 33 years ago. That is a very, I don't even know. I don't even have a word. That is just like, wow. It's that long ago. It was a warm night, if memory serves. I don't even know if I had a jacket. But Basic Instinct, released 33 years ago, directed by Paul Verhoeven and starring Michael Douglas, Sharon Stone, Jeanne Tripplehorn, and in a very thankless supporting role, George DeZunza. This has been episode 475 of the Confessions of a Not-So-Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Friday evening here with me in New York. But if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.